Hi everyone, this is John from Canto.hk, and this is the talk that I gave at Workshop on Cantonese in 2025 July. Before we start, what common character is commonly found but very rarely found in the Cantonese Wikipedia? Make a guess, write it down, and we will review the answer a little later. The workshop talk was about glyphon frequencies in written Cantonese. Glyphon is a word that I made up, so we will see what it means in a little bit. I am an independent worker who is trying to do something to make Cantonese an easy language to learn. If you want to get all the slides, it is already on the website and you can scan the QR code. What we're going to be talking about today is why do we need to invent this glyphon concept, and why is it that and what it is that it is a glyphon. The main part of the talk is going to be about how we count glyphons from a corpus. So if we want to find out what glyphons are most commonly used in Cantonese, how will we do that? If we can find that, what can we use it for? And finally, some future work that, interestingly, I'm not going to do. Let's start with the why. Cantonese have a polyphonic problem, which means a single character could have been read in a different ways. And for teaching and learning, that is also a problem. There's about 30,000 characters can be read in Cantonese. Of these, at least 25% could be read in more than one way. That's 7,500 characters. What's even more problematic is that out of all the characters that we commonly use, most of them are polyphonic. So when you see a short sentence like this one with 9 characters, what a native speaker is going through the head is they're looking at what are the possible ways to read this? So the first one and the third one could have been zhang or chang. And they look at what comes ahead, what comes after, and they decide that the first one is the last name, so it must be zhang. The third time is chang, to mean it had happened before. So then they really search through this space. If you multiply all the possibility, what we're looking at here is 18,432 combinations, of which only one is correct. This is quite difficult for computers to do, and this is very difficult for humans as well if you are just learning characters for the first time. Why do we have a polyphonic problem? We have a polyphonic problem because the same character, when we read it in vernacular Cantonese and when we read it literally, so if we see something in standard written Chinese, we would say sit down as 坐在. Whereas if it is vernacular, it would be 坐喺, 坐. Sometimes the divergence can be quite extreme. For example, we would say in standard written Chinese, a literal kind of reading to be 婦人去了街市買餸, 婦人. Whereas the same character would be 新抱, 抱, 婦. This is one out of 19 ways where the reading may diverge. Some of the other ways it may diverge include sense-dependent readings. What I mean is the first 3 on the top row, lok means happy, ngok is music related, ngao, 經業, 熬業 is to enjoy as a verb. The second row describe 長, which means long. 長 is to grow, and 像 means excess. 像 is very, very rare. Most native speakers do not even know its existence. These are often historical and classical. It comes from many, many years ago. We have a relatively smaller number of glyphs, and we use the same glyph for different senses. Cantonese have a full system, completely irregular, of tone changes. So this is the last name, Lao. When it is used in certain senses like Lao Xin Sang, Mr. Lao, it will be in the citation tone Lao. But in other cases, it would be a Lao, Lao. We would change the tone from the lower 4 into an upper 2. This mixes with other languages. So if we want to say Lao Sir, that would also receive a tone change. Sometimes we have a sound that we already use, but we do not have a character. So we coerce it into an existing glyph that means a similar thing. For example, the character on the right, originally is the same character. On the right is what is classically read as Tim, to lick. Colloquially, we have a sound that means to lick, and we say lamb. So then we say, we don't have a character for it. Let's squeeze it into the existing one that means to lick. So this character now could have been read 2 ways. Of course, when you learn a language, it is about the culture and history across a broad geography. So there are some special geographical historical uses. On the top row, the bolded character in this case is bo. To bo is what we call Tibet in a long, long time ago. Whereas this character normally would be fan, and some people native speaker, never heard how it's read, would have said to fan for all their life. The second row have a simple character, which normally is ding. But in one special use in a book from 2,500 years ago, Siging, a book of poem, this character is read as zhang, and it must be read as zhang, and only in this particular case. Chinese glyphs have many writing systems in traditional Hong Kong, traditional Taiwan, Korean, Japan, China, Vietnam, all share the similar glyphs, but they are written different way. The main divergence happen with the simplified and traditional. Not all simplified characters are original and created for the system. Sometimes they simply took a discarded glyph and use it for a new sense. So on the right-hand side is what it would be if you were to read the glyph in the traditional way, interpreting it as a traditional character. The top one is ban, but when it was used as simplified, it means body, tai. Originally, hip means to well-matched, conforms, hip yam, tone that matches the melody, whereas it got simplified down to a leaf, yip. What that means is that when we are looking at a bunch of characters like this, and we are only giving the Chinese glyph to a learner, they have to learn a lot of stuff. They need to learn in each context what the character should be read as. What I'm proposing here is to say we don't treat the glyph, how you draw it, as the only piece of information. We teach with the glyphon, the glyph, how you draw it, together with how you read it, the phone, combines to become a unit. So this is the glyph, that is the phone. We treat the whole thing as a unit. As such, the 4 times that hang, hang, hong, hung appear, they are actually 4 different glyphons, and we teach them at different time. And the same happen with tam and sum. If we just want to teach reading, the easy way to do this, and I'm going to jump out from the slide and do some typing, is we are going to indicate the reading on every single character. This is not the best way of going about it, because the moment you know how that one horizontal stroke is always read as yat, you no longer need to show it. In the Cantonese font, there's a very simple way of hitting Command I and that's the italic, and you can turn on and off Yut Peng. So what we can do is we can say these are the simple characters early in the progression, and at some point we turn off all the difficult character, all the easy characters, and leave behind and focus the learner's attention on it. The problem is that when we're looking at the character yan, it could have been yan, like 男人,女人. It can be read as 因,一個因. So if we were to looking at 因, is it the same character or not? If you think back to the idea of a glyphon, then you would say it is a different character. It is the same character, but a different glyphon. So we may hide this one, but we do not hide that one. That sounds fine, except that when you think about what we want to do, we want to create material for all levels of learner, including intermediate learners. What teachers are going to be encountering is that they are going to be seeing a prose like this, and they know that some characters like those in green are very common. We want to take those out first. The ones in red are not so usual. We take them out last. But do we actually want teachers to manage creating these material? Can we create a standard list so that everyone can, regardless of which institution, you can interrupt? Each different publisher can create work that bridge into one another's work. If we were going to do that, we would probably remove glyphons, Yut Peng annotation based on several criteria. One of the criteria is how common are we going to see that pair? The middle green one, 佢哋, they, is not easy to write, but it is common. If we're going to do that, then we want to know how often are we going to see a particular glyphon. To do that, we would need to count the frequency of it appearing, and that is the basic gist of the project. What we're doing here is we're taking different kind of corpuses. On the upper left is Animal Farm, a Cantonese translation of Orwell's Animal Farm by Thomas Choi. Hong Kong Cancor, HK Cancor, is a transcript of made in the late 90s by Professor Luke. And what his team does is he recorded about 30 hours of oral conversation, transcribed it, and provided the transcript. The third corpus is the Cantonese Wikipedia, the Yut Wai. And finally, Resonate, or 回響, is a Cantonese literature periodical started in 2020. It is writing entirely in written Chinese, in written Cantonese. If we take all these corpuses and then we add Yut Peng to them, this process is called grapheme to phoneme, or G2P process. Then we can get a list. If we look at 動物農莊, we know it's read as 動, DUN6, 物, MAT6, and so on. We do the same process for all of these corpus, and then we count every time a glyphon shows up. We give it a count, and then we can rank how often we see them. So that is the process. The difficulty here is saying, how do we do this G2P thing? G2P was not simple. For computers, if we look at, say, Wing font, it would read as 他曾婆婆媽媽地愛. Or if you look up a Yut Peng translator, 多曾婆婆媽媽頂愛. You ask Grok, it say 他曾婆婆媽媽地愛. And if you go for Tianwen 2.5, even if it's 72B, it gives you something that kind of look like a Yut Peng, but you can't really pronounce it. The Cantonese font, the last few years, what I've done is to make this G2P thing work. It has a few characteristics. The first one is that it's accurate, and it's accurate not only for written Cantonese, but it's also accurate for standard written Chinese. It does both, even though it's a little better with vernacular colloquial written Cantonese. It is deterministic. What that means is you give it the same prose, it always gives you the same answer. It uses a pattern matching mechanism to do that, and we will not talk too much, but just a little bit a second later. It works for both simplified and traditional Chinese. Often in prose that we find, we see mixed usage of standard written Chinese, Cantonese, in simplified, in traditional, maybe in different variation of traditional Chinese from Hong Kong and Taiwan. The font G2P works for all of these. There is a way of easily manually correcting using the font as an UI. We maybe talk about this at the end. And the editing that you do on the UI is going to get reflected by the shaper. This is very fast as well. So on a MacBook M1, it runs at about 180,000 graphemes per second. So we can do fairly large batch of work with it. And then it failed gracefully. What does it mean to be accurate? This is the error rate, and we compare a variety of G2P solution. From top is a local LLM, so AI, a large language model. This is one that you can easily run on your normal machine. And the error rate is 97%. What that means is if you give it 100 words, it will get it wrong 97% of the time. 97 will be wrong, 3 will be right. When we scale up the model, it gets a little better. When we go to things that you can barely run locally, like a 400B Llama 3.1, it's still 25% wrong. 25% wrong is pretty awful. What that means in practice is that every 3 characters, it gets 1 wrong. It's unusable. When you get to closed source proprietary LLMs like Cloud Sonnet, GPT-4o, they do somewhat better at 6 to 8% kind of error rate. What that means is every sentence you have something wrong. I think that is quite unacceptable. What is funny is that you jump through all of these LLM hoop, and you actually can do a lot better, a little bit better with PyCantonese, which is a rule-based system that just matches a dictionary. How's the Cantonese font? 3 to 1, we're going to click the mouse button, and what you're going to see is that it performs at way better than all the other options. How do we know what is the accuracy? I have annotated the animal form and logged the errors chapter by chapter. There's a total of 46,000 characters in this book, and the error is 61 in total. That gives it a 99.87%. Mind you, this is matching, this is the best case scenario, kind of. Of these 61, actually, it's really around 45 because 15 of them is from Ma Tai. Ma Tai, the same glyph could mean 2 things. The first is water chestnut, in which case it's read as Ma Tai, and it can mean Ma Tai. When I made the font, I made the gamble that most people are going to be talking about water chestnut, so it's Ma Tai. But Animal Farm have a lot of horse hoof, Ma Tai. Because it is deterministic, it always make the same mistake. What that means is we can go and do a quick search and replace, and we get it down to 45 out of 46,000. That's a 99.9% accuracy rate. On third-party benchmarking, when there is no style guide being followed, there's no orthographic standard, it goes down to about 99.2%. Still way better than anything else. If you want to know more about this G2P thing, I've already written 10,000 characters on it. There's the QR code and there's the URL. In brief, conceptually, what we need to do is to go back to the mess that I mentioned to you of why a character could have been read in multiple ways. It could be read in multiple ways because the text could be meaning written Cantonese, to be read in a colloquial way, or whether it is standard written Chinese to be read in the literal way. So we first want to classify the text, and then we need to do a segmentation to say 好正, great. If there is a 確 at the end of it, 好正確, the 好 and 正確 is separated from one another. That is a segmentation task. Classifying and segmentation are both difficult natural language processing tasks for Cantonese. We don't need to get it right. We need to get it just a little bit, and that's going to push the accuracy way up from its plateau at around 5%. Once you do a classification, you do a segmentation, then your assigned yutpeng is going to be a lot better. The really interesting thing about the Cantonese font is that we compress all of these decision-making down to the same pattern matching. Here's an example of how it works. Each character, whether it's simplified like the first character or traditional like all the rest, gets a default reading. Then we do some kind of a rule-based matching that say, does it match this pattern? If it does, if Tai comes after Ma, then it's probably one chunk. And then we say it's Ma Tai. And we do that across the whole sentence. However, if Ma Tai, Mrs. Ma, comes after Zek, a measure word meaning a measure word for animal. Mrs. Ma is probably not an animal in the four-leg running sense. So we do a second order pattern matching that say that magenta thing is one chunk. This is kind of special because what it's doing here, it looks like just any other substitution, but what it's doing is a segmentation. When you do all of these layers of pattern matching, then you get yourself to 馬太隻馬太懶，坐喺度坐以待斃呢. For those of you sharp-eyed, you will see that punctuation is part of the game. We are using idioms. We're using both dictionary and non-dictionary sources. Again, if you're interested, go back to the blog article. Now that we've talked about the G2P process, what we are doing here is we're just going back to take all of these corpus, run them through the G2P, count them. Speed means quite a lot here because we're counting tens of millions from Wikipedia. Resonate, I only have the first 3.5 years, 22 issues, 1 million character. I'm still collecting the rest. If we look at HK Cancore, the oral transcript as an example, we count 170,000 glyphons, then we can say, okay, the first ranked glyphon, the one that is used most frequently, shows up 10,000 times. It's quite interesting. Every 17 character, we say this character once. The frequency might be a bit surprising to you. If we know the frequencies, then we can ask what is the cumulative frequency from which we can write down some kind of a CDF. There is a list of the glyphons. If you just know hai, to be or yes, an exclamation, and a negation, that's really 10% of what oral speech Cantonese mean. You can do this for HK Cancore. You can do this for Animal Farm, for Resonate, which is a typical written Cantonese, and for the Cantonese Wikipedia. It turned out to be a little strange. This is available in the handout or in a blog article somewhere. And it is telling you what are the characters and the rank in each corpus. And the dividing lines show where 10% means. So in HK Can Core, oral transcript, 2 character, and then you jump into the next 10%. In Animal Farm, 4 characters, ge, koi, yet, they, and then it brings you to 10%, and so on. Lots of super interesting findings here. If we want to go deep, if we want to take a step back out and look at the forest, the stats is quite interesting. What it's saying is that the most commonly used characters are used extremely commonly. How extremely commonly? Well, extremely commonly. If you only know 500 characters, you will be able to read 90% of an oral transcript, provided that you choose your 500 characters right. You can do 85% of Animal Farm, almost 80% of a Cantonese literature periodical, and even on Wikipedia, you could hit about 75%. This is surprising to a lot of native speakers who believe that from the education system that you need 4 digits or near 5-digit Chinese glyph before you can call yourself literate. We can think about this in a different way, and we zoom in to the left-hand side. If you want to get 80% comprehension, if you want to be able to recognize and read the book without you paying assistance, you only need 400 characters for a novel. You only need 550 characters to read a literature periodical. You only need 600 characters to read a very diverse encyclopedia. And if you want to do what we do day to day, what you will read and write on your WhatsApp messages, that's 220. Coming back to the first question I asked all of you, what common character is rarely found in the Wikipedia? The correct answer here is I. In Wikipedia, unlike the other corpus where ngo, I, shows up in the first top 10 or top 5, I doesn't show up in Wikipedia until 550. If we know what characters are commonly used, what can we do with it? Well, we can use this to build ourselves a character learning roadmap. We can take this as one of the factors, take maybe simplicity or how productive it is for learning other characters, and then we can start build a progression. We learn hao, yan, yet first, and then we go to yi, sub, zhou, tou, and so on. What that means in practical sense is that this is what it looks like if we label every single character with yut ping. If we go up a letter and we say we remove the 1, look at the second line, we remove the yet, yan, hao, then, and we bold the next 7 characters that you're supposed to learn, then it looks like this. If you learn the first 10 characters, if you learn the first 32 characters, if you learn the first 100 character and in a handout, PDF on the back page, this is what's being printed. And if you were to learn 400 characters relevant to the book, that's what it looks like. There's a lot more accomplishment with 400 characters, 400 glyphons than what people may have expected. This Animal Farm is going to be something available on canto.hk in all of these progressions. So we will also publish the roadmap together with a mini dictionary of how you go about learning these characters that give you a progressive guide to learn things that are, you can learn 3 characters, you can learn an extra 7, If you can learn the first 10, it gives you confidence that you can do another 22. If you can do 32, you can probably do another 60. If you learn 2 characters a day, in half a year, you get to 400. And this is all the characters that you would be able to learn. You'll be able to read. The glyphon idea came about a month and a half ago. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. A lot of Chinese learners want to be able to do not only written Cantonese, even though that is their primary focus because they're learning it for family, but maybe they also want to be able to read standard written Chinese. So we would be able to do a parallel set of survey with standard written Chinese as a genre. Some of the problems here is that written Cantonese don't have standard orthography. If we go back to the HK Can core, they would use different glyph for ga, la, wo, than what other people may use nowadays. So if we want to have a systematic, here are the glyphons, we need to standardize the orthography. Because we don't have standard orthography, we have an ambiguous problem. For example, we use the same hao, wo character to mean wo. In these cases, there's no basis for the G2P algorithm to bite on. There's nothing to bite on. It requires mind reading. We want the G2P algorithm is always getting better. The data set is always getting better. So I would like to rerun it with what I have in the latest for all of them. And then we can start comparing between genre, doing detailed analysis within genre, asking for zheng, which glyphon of the character should we teach first. One of the last and really quite interesting thing is if we can start taking these glyphon, hook it onto compounds or words, then we can build up a database which assists in the learning. You learn a glyphon, you can see all the other contexts in which it can be used. So this is towards glyphon frequencies in written Cantonese, a talk given at a workshop on Cantonese. This is not complete work. We will hopefully do more work on this, polish it up, and write it up either as a blog article or as an academic article. If you have questions, you can reach out to me on Discord, on the forums, or my email is here.